So a quick update here on Vancouver, sort of a feet on the ground perspective, but also I do take more of an analytical approach, more of a, I guess, part of a fascination for myself personally. So there's a lot of noise. We read a lot of media headlines, I guess, particularly for those that don't live in Vancouver, that are just reading in Toronto from a distance about what's actually happening. So I think there's a lot of sort of confusion. But right now, year to date, as of the end of September, so we just have the most recent statistics came out. We have the fewest home transactions since the year 2000. So if you take, whether you're looking at a detached house, condo, townhouse, etc., if you take all those, lump them together, we have the fewest sales transactions year to date through the first 9 months since the year 2000. So kind of puts things into context. Condo sales fewest since 2013. So even though that's the more affordable segment of the market, the condo market has slowed down significantly in Vancouver as well. And house sales, single family, I think it's ultimately an affordability issue. Even though prices have come off in the detached segment anywhere from 15% upwards of 40%, house sales are just they're not moving. And so we see fewest sales on record through the first 9 months. So this is just a quick chart. This is, again, year-to-date sales. You'll sort of see it on the far bottom right. That's 2019. That's year-to-date transactions across Greater Vancouver. And so, yeah, what about prices? I don't have the latest statistics for September, but we have the MLS benchmark for August. I think some people are familiar with that. So as of August, detached home prices were down 9.7% year over year. And condo prices were down 7.4% year over year. But again, that's just a year over year comparison. It's not like a peak to trough. I think that the detached segment, again, as I mentioned, is down anywhere from 15 to 40, and you're seeing the typical condo is down. So this is detached prices here. So you can sort of see the large run up we had. You can see where it sort of started to come back down. A lot of that after the foreign buyers tax. We actually had another sort of blip there, or bull trap almost, you might want to call it, in 2017. So prices actually started to pick up, and that's when back in sort of the spring of 2017, everyone said, yeah, see, we shook off the foreign buyers tax, Vancouver housing can never go down, and so prices started to increase, and then after that they just eventually rolled over, and that's kind of where we've been ever since. And same thing for condo prices. Again, you'll see the sort of dip. I think, again, I call it sort of the bull trap there. Prices continued to increase after the foreign buyers tax into 2017, going through a blow off top, and ultimately peaked in about February 2018. And since then, again, I would argue that they're down about 15%. So there are some recent signs of stabilization. Sales are up 20%. Actually, so this is, if you actually look at I think this slide here is wrong, but so if you look at the recent headline, which will probably come out today, for Greater Vancouver, home sales in September this month are up 46% year over year. So it's a huge jump from 2018, but again, you're comparing to one of the slowest Septembers last year. So really just coming off a low base from last year, but be kind of curious to see how that impacts psychology moving forward. But we have, I think, a huge driver of that has been mortgage rates being down nearly 100 basis points. The 5-year fixed rate, I have clients getting around 269 to 279 today. So I think that, and Nigel's talked about this a lot. I think that he, can explain it better than I can. But we are seeing some signs of mortgage credit picking up off basically 18-year lows. So there's a little bit of signs that I'm finding, at least with my clients, feet on the ground perspective. Like, none of my clients are having a tough time, getting approved for a mortgage. They're, at least in the entry level, sort of mid range. So I know that people, talk about how tight mortgages are and stress test this, but I would say for the most part, my clients are getting approved, and at the end of the day, everybody there is fully employed and they're borrowing at 2.7%. So I think that's why we're still seeing quite a bit of activity in sort of the low range, affordable product, whereas a huge chunk of the declines have come from the higher end of the market. But again, I think there are still headwinds. Global growth slowing. I think everybody's aware of that. Everyone and their grandma is talking about potential recession on the horizon. Mortgage rates, how much further can they fall? Again, they went up to 3.5%. They've come down to 2.7%. We're still seeing, I would argue, weak sales activity in Greater Vancouver. So how much more stimulation can we get from lower mortgage rates to push housing activity? I think at the end of the day, there is still a massive housing affordability challenge in Vancouver. But I think one of the larger things that I personally focus on with a lot of my research is the pre-sale market activity. I think that BC's GDP is highly concentrated in the real estate and construction sector. And so what happens in the pre-sale space, driving growth in the economy and in the job market, I think is paramount. So just going to quickly touch on that. But the foreign buyers have slowed, as Christine had just mentioned. Getting money out, I think it's pretty obvious. But there's just an interesting stat from Dealogic noting that the Chinese have actually become net sellers of overseas global assets this year to date. But if you can actually see this in the BC land transfer tax data, so the government's gotten a lot better at tracking foreign purchases in British Columbia. And so if you look at their property transfer tax registry, is foreigners purchased $141 million worth of residential real estate in August 2019. That's the most recent data point. And that's down from a cycle high of $400 million in June 2017. Now again, the data was first collected in January 2017. So you can imagine what that foreign purchasing number would have looked like back in 2016 at the peak of the market. So this is just a quick chart on that. Where am I pointing here? Oops. Yeah, so this is there's the value of foreign residential purchases in British Columbia. So you can see it's a pretty clear trend line of what the purchasing activity has been. There's a number of reasons for that. Again, as Christine had mentioned, there's obviously Chinese capital controls, but also a lot of regulations and taxes coming in. So as a hypothetical, if you're a foreign buyer coming into Greater Vancouver to purchase a piece of real estate, as a hypothetical scenario, if you purchase a $3 million house, you have your 20% foreign buyer's tax, plus your increased property transfer tax as well, that you're going to pay $680,000 or $668,000 just to close on that. So just to get your title registered in your name, you're going to have to pay an additional $668,000 on top of your $3 million purchase price. And I would argue that, at least in Vancouver, that if you're buying a house, $3 million in Vancouver is, I don't even know if I'd call that a luxury product, but so that's, and then you also have the BC speculation tax, which was introduced in beginning of 2018. And then obviously the increased scrutiny on money laundering and beneficial ownership, etc. So what does this mean for pre-sale condos? I can say with a lot of confidence that the pre-sale market was heavily influenced overseas. So developers were actively marketing overseas in Hong Kong, doing road shows, and particularly when you look at pre-sale condos, in the downtown core and in the high-rise concrete buildings, is at upwards of $3,000 per square foot. There's not a whole lot of local demand for 3,000 square foot condos, and so a lot of that was sold offshore. And so what we've now seen is a huge drop-off in the pre-sale market. So, we're offering things like 1 year free avocado toast, free Teslas, $100,000 realtor bonuses. And so they're getting extremely creative trying to, get their pre-sale numbers so they can get their construction finance and get off the ground. But I've done a number of research of this on this topic. So. And I think it ultimately comes back to, again, as some of the presentations I've talked about earlier today, is are people going to be able to close on their pre-sales? And so one of the interesting stories that I had noticed, there's a very reputable developer in Vancouver, and so one of the guys who works for one of the large Canadian banks here, I won't say who it is, but he flew in and we had a coffee and we were discussing this project that was in the media quite a bit, but was heavily marketed offshore. And he says, we'll never work with this developer again. I don't want to touch any more of their projects. And I said, well, why not? And he says, they're so dependent on the Chinese buyer offshore. He's like, the closing risk. He's like, I couldn't sleep at night. If you sell this condo at $3,000 a square foot, and these guys don't close, what's the local market? How are you going to resell that? Sure, you've collected a 20% deposit, but what is the market? Is it $2,500 a foot? Is it $2,200 a foot? $2,000 a foot? Nobody really knows because it's just kind of this weird luxury product that, again, I don't know what the local demand is for these high-rise condos at $3,000 a foot. So this is Vancouver presale activity. This is just the number of, this is from Urban Analytics. So what they show is the number of available units at the pre-sale centers versus the number of sales. So we can see that the number of active units for sale has risen significantly over last about year. Pre-sale market ultimately peaked out at the beginning of 2018. Some of the incentives here. So this one actually on the left here was first 20 home buyers. Developer will pay your mortgage for a year. But they actually did that project just despite this was not able to get enough pre-sales. So they actually ended up switching the project to a purpose-built rental. Yeah, but so I mean, just to quickly, I'm almost done here wrapping this up. But I think what's important to also understand is not only with this Chinese buyer heavily in the pre-sale market, but there was also a lot of locals. And this was going back to 2015. We saw this condo mania, people lining up for condos, trying to get into the market. And so a lot of locals were binging on that too, particularly more so out in the suburbs. So I personally had clients, I remember getting, people would start assigning condos and you get multiple offers on assignments. People, flipping their condos is basically sort of get in, get out. This one is in Port Coquitlam here, people tenting out for a couple days. So I don't think this is normal, rational behavior, but that was kind of the market that we had back in the day. And so this is the number of people now looking to do assignment flips. So if you look at Greater Vancouver Metro assignments, I think it's quite cyclical in terms of, you can see that prior to the last sort of housing run-up we had in 2007, 2008, this is the number of monthly active inventory for sale. But this is only assignments that are listed on the MLS. So a lot of these assignments are not listed on the MLS because of regulations. Developers don't allow it. And this is just for Greater Vancouver. If you actually look at the Fraser Valley chart, which is out in the suburbs, for those that aren't familiar with it, assignments are currently actually at all-time highs. So there's a lot of people that are looking to flip these condos, and unfortunately that market has become extremely illiquid. Buyers have a lot of options right now. The condo market is down. It's relatively soft, and so people aren't really interested in unfinished condo. They're looking at finished product, and so I think it's going to be interesting in terms of how does the market play out over the next couple of years, because we have just over 45,000 units under construction, again an all-time record high. So given that a lot of the pre-sale condos are geared towards investors, how many of them are looking to flip and are going to be able to get out, and then vice versa, are they going to be able to close? And this is just a chart from RBC, but even if you adjust for population growth, we have a lot of the narrative in Greater Vancouver is that prices can or should continue to go up because of population growth. But I think even if you adjust for that, you can clearly see that we have been building quite a bit in Greater Vancouver. So yeah, what are developers doing? Housing starts are still elevated. They are still trying to push things through. A lot of that's just because of basically a lag on how developers work. You put a lot of money early on in the process, and so you want to get this thing off the ground. It's a lot of capital intensive project. But pre-sales are struggling, and despite all the continued ramp up of incentives, at the end of the day, if they can't get their construction financing targets, they won't get off the ground. And so what we're actually seeing is developers have pulled back significantly in new land acquisition. So new land acquisitions in Greater Vancouver have dropped actually by, so this is housing starts. This is Metro Vancouver land sales by quarter. So this is from Altus Group. It shows in the second quarter of 2019, land purchases by developers dropped 58% year over year. So you can clearly see where developers are sort of aligning their future intentions. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, developers have pulled back on new land acquisitions. Q2 sales fell 58%. And so yeah, I don't know what does this mean for the BC economy, which is so levered towards real estate. 9% of the BC labor force is employed in construction. I think that's kind of the headwinds moving forward. And so yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think that things have sort of stabilized, at least for now. We had the drop off. I think sales are picking up, stabilized, but I think there's some more volatility ahead.